This is Eli from Binge Express, and today we follow a bunch of college students on their way to a nature cabin in the woods. We will witness an attack of a zombified family, the Buckners, and attempt to beat them, as always, in exciting and creative ways. Let's start off with the red flags, because once we arrive at the lodge, there are multiple of those that we should talk about. First of all, Holden detects a one-way mirror in his room connecting his with Dana's, which is definitely a weird feature in a wood cabin. We all know what one-way mirrors are, but how do they work exactly? Well, mirrors like these typically only appear reflective in brightly lit rooms, but actually light passes through each side equally. However, only those standing in the darker lit room are able to look through it because the reflected light of the brightly lit room is pretty much overwhelming the light shining through from the dark side. And therefore, while the mirror looks perfectly normal in the bright room, from the perspective of the person standing in the darker room, the mirror looks more like a shaded window. In case you wonder where such mirrors are typically found, look no further than interrogation rooms, of course, execution chambers, and interestingly enough, even teleprompters where text is projected onto glass directly in front of a film or television camera. Now, discovering something like this would definitely make me go through the house thoroughly to see what else there is that isn't part of the standard interior. I mean, it's just kind of weird. Sometimes being overly paranoid can be actually helpful. Who knew? To do that as effectively as possible, team up in groups of 2 and search one room at a time. By doing that, chances are you will find more weird features and conclude that something must be wrong with this cabin.
There. What the hell was that?
I mean, I think the obvious big downside at this point, or once you have arrived at the cabin, is that you are constantly being watched and controlled by the underground surveillance team that we will talk about later. At this point though, none of our characters knew about the scheme they are trapped in, and well, even the mirror from before doesn't automatically make you figure that out. For that, you must either find conclusive evidence like actual cameras, or you recite an incantation that revives the Buckners as zombies while one of your friends plays with the Apple of Eden Antichrist edition. So as Dana unknowingly revives the Buckners as zombies, there are a few scenes where our characters didn't leverage their potential. The first encounter happens when Kurt and Jules are getting it on outdoor. Marvin Gaye would be proud. Geez, that handpin though, it was pretty neat. However, the screaming from Jules and the punches from Kurt aren't helpful whatsoever. You're clearly facing zombies. Sure, you may be under shock, I can understand that, but Kurt seemed to be quite in control here. There were several options he had to get Jules out of the situation alive. First of all, we were in a forest, and that means the floor is uneven and potentially wet, and it seemed like they weren't far off the lodge neither. My best guess would be around 3 minutes of walking distance, which makes it easy reachable in under a minute when running at full speed. Although you might want to adjust your velocity in relation to the woodiness of the environment. The last thing you want is to trip and fall and perhaps even fracture a bone in this situation. The Buckners also didn't seem to have anything in common with the zombies of World War Z or Train to Busan. I mean, those would have been impossible to escape from. But in our case here, these zombies look more like the slow and bulky types, which is definitely a big advantage to consider. However, there were 3 of them, and all of them were armed. They are also capable of teamwork, as we can see, and so our 2 unarmed characters have only little chance to take them head on. The single best option is run. Daddy Buckner though seems to have a bear trap flail, which is a pretty cool thing. However, it also has quite a long range, so you have to keep this in mind when running away from him particularly. Jules does the exact opposite. She mindlessly runs towards Kurt, facing Dad Buckner with her back, which was obviously a dumb move she had to pay for in the end. But you don't have to, okay? So if you use the trees to cover, he won't be able to snatch you from behind. Basically, the best thing would be running in slalom around the trees towards the lodge. This way, it gives you a pretty high chance to escape and survive the attack successfully. Additionally, keep in mind that the 2 other zombies used lengthy, albeit close-range knives, which are technically less powerful than the long-range flail from Daddy Buckner. You would do well to remember these facts, as it will only add to your future combat strategy. Back at the lodge, Kurt alarms the other characters and comes up with a pretty intelligent plan to avoid the impending threat. He tells the others this: lock down the cabin, stay together, and play safe. It's pretty good. However, I would additionally add, arm yourself and attack and defend in teams. You see, I think we can all agree that zombies are some of the most difficult things to kill, and often even impossible. If you encounter the immortal ones, then you should always aim at chopping off their heads, arms, or legs to cripple them and lower their ability to threaten you. The easiest way this can be attained is obviously through teamwork and mid-range weapons like large knives, katanas, my personal favorite, and bayonets. An additional benefit of using weapons like these is their stealth bonus. I mean, let's be honest guys, the cringe is real when you see a character firing a double-barrel shotgun at the slow zombie in an open field. Since we have a fireplace in the lodge, burning the zombies might be a tempting idea, I can understand. But you should always look for an alternative, because the only thing worse than a zombie is a burning one. Since zombies don't feel pain and won't lose consciousness due to carbon monoxide poisoning, a fire wouldn't really cause them much harm until the body eventually falls apart and turns into ashes. However, that takes quite a lot of time. Basically, a cremation process can take up to 3 hours, and that is in a narrow, heat-proof chamber with consistent fire intensity of 800 degrees Celsius or 1470 degrees Fahrenheit. For comparison, the average household fire burns only at around 600 degrees Celsius or 1100 degrees Fahrenheit, meaning a burning zombie in an open space would take a very, very long time to finally decay. Bad idea, keep this in mind, guys. However, if you insist on burning a zombie, I can totally understand. However, then you might as well use a propane torch or Elon Musk's flamethrower. I linked them in the description. Now, unfortunately, in the movie, the characters decide to split up regardless, and so each one gets locked up into their individual room. Suboptimal, but, let's roll with it. Owen Wilson... Marty, of course, gets attacked by one of the knife-wielding zombies from before. It goes without saying that turning your back to the window while being threatened by zombies is probably the dumbest thing you could possibly do, even when believing you are in a reality TV show. Surprisingly, when the zombie snatched Marty, he didn't try to bite him, by the way. Meaning, we can conclude that you won't be zombified if you are getting bitten, scratched, or covered in zombie fluids. Still, to be sure, we should avoid any unnecessary contact altogether. The advantage here was clearly the one-on-one combat and the mid-range baseball coffee mug bong from Marty. Even if that weapon wouldn't allow him to seriously injure the zombie, it could definitely be used to keep the zombie at a distance for some extra time. He decides to run though, which I generally consent to, but he lacked appropriate preparation for an escape. What I mean is, since he wore a shirt, it would have been smart and probably easily possible to take it off and throw it over the head of the zombie. While that may not cause eternal confusion to the zombie, it can definitely help to make a successful escape without being taken out by a throwing knife. Once you have gotten out of the situation, congratulations, then you want to rejoin your friends as soon as possible. Because everybody knows hunting zombies is a team sport. Meanwhile, Dana and Holden find a way to reconnect by breaking the one-way mirror from before, which was an obvious but nevertheless smart move. Underneath the bed, they find another trapdoor leading into an underground chamber. Now, for starters, I wouldn't be so careless in deciding that it's empty. I mean, you're fighting zombies here. In the very least, arm yourself with anything before hopping down, just in case. Using the lamp to glimpse into the dark room was clever though. Down there, our characters explore the chamber very casually. They look like me looking for the milk at Tesco. I mean, you can't underestimate angry crowds at supermarkets, but it isn't comparable to a zombie threat in tight environment. Therefore, lowering your guard is a big no, and the first thing you should have done since you have entered that underground room is to grab any of the weapons on the table, preferably a long-range weapon, like I mentioned many times before, and keep your guard up. Now, even if the weapon you choose won't be of any help, and I will explain why, you still want to be as effective as possible in both defending and attacking. Anything is better than your bare hands, especially when fighting zombies. So, Why wouldn't any of the weapons on the table be of any help? Well, when Dana saves Holden from the zombie attack, she grabs a knife from the table and stabs the zombie countless times. Right afterwards though, we see one of the controllers activates a switch that causes the knife in Dana's hand to emit electricity, which most likely caused the muscles in her hand to contract and ultimately made her drop the knife. She doesn't seem to notice though, probably because of the adrenaline rushing through her body, which, as everybody of you knows, dampens any physical sensation by a significant margin. This small detail lets us conclude that all the weapons on the table are probably rigged and therefore close to useless. However, when she somehow successfully immobilized Eddie Buckner, with the knife by the way, good for her, they would have done well to grab his bear trap flail. As we have seen, this weapon seems to be the most terrifying used by any of the Buckner family members. So, to gain this weapon means to gain the upper hand here. Also, chances are pretty good that this weapon isn't rigged. In any way, at the very least, they should have taken the chains hanging from the ceiling. Strong chains like these make excellent ranged weaponry, as well as great tools for immobilizing large, strong enemies. I mean, look at the guy here. The perfect tool in our situation. So, as they escaped the cabin and ran to the camper and just like that stormed in, I kind of lost it for a second right there. Casually entering this unlocked vehicle amidst a zombie attack, like me stumbling into my toilet at 2 AM, is kind of a risky business. I mean, you're escaping zombies and not groupies. Not that it's worse, but I'm just saying. While to get to the camper and drive out of the area is a logical assessment and probably the best way to go here, it is also true that none of the Buckner zombies were quick in movement, which gives me the impression that our characters could have afforded a quick break to analyze their situation here. In any way, storming into a large unlocked vehicle with comparably vast space where someone or thing could hide is never a good idea. I mean, even if you're fleeing from running zombies and have no time to inspect the hideout of your choice, you should at least remain cautious when moving forward. Deciding quickly and thoughtlessly in risky situations often leads those to fail and, well, in this case, even death.
You gotta stay calm.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm talking about. But you know what? Before we continue, let's go back a little to see what happens to Kurt. Well, I guess that didn't turn out well either, did it? But I give it an A for the effort and a B+ for originality. Now, if you are surrounded by an invincible force field, well, that's pretty shitty. Not gonna lie about that. It's virtually impossible to escape. Not that we've already invented this technology, but it does seem like the field into which Kurt crashes resembles nanotube technology. And that is a real thing, just not very sophisticated yet. I'm not going into full details here, because first of all, I would get probably most of it wrong, and secondly, it would take a while. But basically, nanotubes are 1,000 times stronger than conventional steel, but just about 1 atom thick. Pretty thin, I know. Anyway, since the controllers locked down a tunnel through which our characters have first arrived, we can assume that the force field is not omnipresent and therefore can be overcome by digging a tunnel underneath it. The only problem is, that's pretty much impossible for our characters here. I mean, have a look at the ground. That looks like some solid rock, and while I'm no geologist, it somewhat occurs to me that the type of rock looks pretty dense. Without sharp tools like giant picks, forget digging any kind of tunnel here, even if you had a bunch of kids digging for you. But fast forward to when Dana crashes into the lake with the vehicle. In that situation, forget about the zombie passenger. The biggest threat here is the sinking and rapidly with water filling camper. Believe me when I say this is not a joke. You need to get out of there as soon as you can. No standard vehicles are airtight, meaning this would be a great opportunity to test out the hyperventilation technique I explained in our last video. Now, the main problem with the vehicle underwater is the immense water load pressing against the doors. Forget being able to open any of these. Your best and pretty much only chance is to break one of the windows through which you can fit. Dana, however, casually opens the hatch, which is definitely not possible in real life. To escape those circumstances, you need a car safety hammer somewhere in reach, even with fastened seatbelts. Perhaps a knife is a good choice as well, for when you need to cut through the seatbelts first. Dana survives and gets back up, that poor girl. Obviously in agony and despair, she seemingly and understandably is ready to give up. just when our favorite bear trap flail swinging zombie Undertaker / Michael Myers hybrid appears and attacks. At this point I was pretty emotionally invested, as Marty saves her and they finally reunite after exchanging the latest news about their lives.
What have you been up to?
They go underground to face their punishers in a pretty epic final combat. Now I know what you want to see, people. The monsters in the cabin in the woods were pretty darn awesome. I mean, look at this dude right here. I wish we could have seen him more in action. Looking at the blades in his head and the puzzle in his hand, he is definitely inspired by the Xenobites of Hellraiser, the 1987 flick, which to me at least are some of the coolest monsters in terms of background story. Then we got the angry molesting tree, and while I would like to say that I wanted to see him in action too, I'm not sure what that says about me. Well, in any way, whoever came up with this character, or whatever you want to call it, has a pretty wild imagination. Not sure if I ever want to meet this dude. And while I would love to go on about the monster references in this flick, we have to get Dana and Marty out of there first. Technically, they did an amazing job down there. Releasing all the monsters and have them purge the whole place was risky, but nevertheless the only option with an at least possible successful outcome. It surprises me that those in charge down there don't run an emergency protocol if all monsters should be released. I mean, for some reason they do have those completely useless yet heavily armed special forces, right? I could imagine something like an abandoned strategy. If the place should be overrun by all the monsters, like in our case here, there should be a way out for all the 9-to-5 workers down there. I mean, let's be honest here, guys. Would you work for this organization without an emergency protocol and a hefty endurance cover plan? I don't think so. If I were in charge of this facility, this is what I would have prepared. First, I would have hidden explosives at key points throughout the facility, just like Switzerland did during the Cold War to seal off the whole nation of its neighbors if necessary. Pretty intense, but I guess survival is key. Secondly, I have an emergency escape route for all the employees that could be destroyed afterwards after everyone has left. That way everyone could survive and the monsters would be trapped down there, even if just temporarily. And lastly, purge the place of all remaining monsters that can be killed. Perhaps acid rain, water flooding, or an artificial napalm inferno could be taken into consideration. If you have better ideas, let me know them, please. But anyway, let's go back to Dana and Marty first. After they run out of the control room to escape the monster bat, they stumble around the facility not really knowing where to go. If it was me, I would have decided to take the elevator up again, because I would prefer some slow bulky zombies like the Buckners instead of the horror that is lurking in every corner down there. Back up, you can at least enjoy your last breaths at an idyllic lakeside shore with decent moonlight and a decadent Herbie cigarette, all the while spending the last minutes of the world in companionship of your childhood best friend. It's pretty good. Well, yeah, the Ancient Ones. That's a good question, people. If you wonder how to beat them, I guess this is the best solution. With that, thanks for watching, and I see you guys in the next one.